Do you have any questions, please? Go. Let's not start with CNN because they're just so wrong. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. You repeatedly mentioned last night that Russia's attack on Ukraine was a mistake. What is the exact mistake?
Yes, that's where we left off. We were about to talk about Russia. Well, we're going to do our best with this one. As quickly as the whole Trump, Russia, Ukraine situation keeps changing, I expect by the time I go to record the audio for this video, a lot of what I have written in my notes will have become outdated. And I expect by the time I finish editing this, things will have changed even more. And remember what I said at the start of this series about how trying to provide political commentary on any single issue during the Trump administration is a lot like screaming at a single drop of rain while standing out in the middle of a thunderstorm? That's kind of how I feel right now. Putting this video together is reminding me of why I felt so overwhelmed and discouraged and didn't upload anything for a few months. Even today, as I am writing this, the Russia situation is still making new headlines, and things keep happening, and I'm just a lone peapod. How is anyone supposed to keep up with all of this? Anyway, in a previous video, we talked about how Donald Trump loves the notorious dictator and war criminal Vladimir Putin. We talked about how Trump has expressed admiration for and praised Putin's tactics, going so far as to describe Putin's invasion of Ukraine as being genius and wonderful. What the reporter is asking Trump about right now is in reference to remarks that Donald Trump had made on the previous night, following a Russian missile strike on the Ukrainian city of Sumy on Palm Sunday, leaving over 100 Ukrainians injured and 34 dead, including at least 2 children. This strike came after weeks of expressed concern from Ukrainian officials who felt that the Sumy area made for a probable target by the Russians and that the city was currently at risk. By the way, these headlines and clippings that I keep throwing up on the screen, there will be links to all of them in the pinned comment below. Any headline you see in this video, there will be a link to it, and to a lot of other corroborative reporting as well. So, the Russians launched missiles into Sumy, after weeks of Ukrainian officials previously expressing fears that this attack might come to pass. The attack was launched on Palm Sunday, as people were gathering together to observe the holy day, reportedly using cluster munitions in an evident attempt to maximize civilian casualties. That night, when Donald Trump was asked about this latest crime against humanity perpetrated by his dictatorial role model, Putin, he tried to play it off as if the attack was a mistake.
Reaction to Russia's Palm Sunday attack on Ukraine.
I think it was terrible, and I was told they made a mistake.
When a reporter pressed him on this, on whether Donald Trump was seriously going on the record to say that Russia had merely accidentally launched cluster munitions into crowds of religious adherents who had gathered to observe a Christian holiday, Trump brushed the question off, suggesting that the reporter should go and ask the Russians about it.
In the attack, you said they made you were told they made a mistake. Do you mean it was unintentional?
They made a mistake. I believe it was. Look, you're going to ask them.
So that is the context going into this reporter's question. Last night, Donald Trump said that the attack was a mistake, when asked to clarify on what he meant by that, and whether he was claiming that the attack had merely happened by accident somehow. He chose to be coy about what he had meant, and told the press to go ask the Russians if it was an accident or not. So hopefully today, we will get some clarification on what he was actually trying to say.
The mistake was letting the war happen. If Biden were competent, and if Zelensky were competent, and I don't know that he is. We had a rough session with this guy over here.
So that's what he's going with. He's not sticking with the attack having been an accident, nor is he saying that Putin made a mistake in the sense that he went too far this time. No, now that he has had time to mull it over and think his response through, he has decided that the mistake wasn't made by Putin at all. The blame, as it turns out, rests upon President Biden and President Volodymyr Zelensky. To start us off, let's take a quick moment to put that first claim to bed. That line about how the war wouldn't have happened at all if Trump had been president instead of Joe Biden. In the months leading up to the 2024 election, Donald Trump made this specific claim over and over again. The war wouldn't have even happened if he had been president instead of Joe Biden, and if he became president, he was going to stop the war in as little as 24 hours. This claim was like one of the foundational building blocks upon which his campaign was built. It was right up there in importance with sending out dog whistles to members of the Ku Klux Klan, sharing a stage with and having dinner with neo-Nazis, and being fascinated by the word groceries.
And I went on groceries. It's a very simple word, groceries. Like almost, who uses the word? I started using the word, the groceries.
More people tell me about groceries. The word grocery, I've heard it more in the last year than any other word, I think.
Everyone tells me about the word groceries.
You hear the word groceries, you say, really? But I get more complaints about groceries.
Beautiful but simple word, groceries. Sir, my groceries.
The cost of groceries, a word that I used a lot on the campaign. It's like an old-fashioned word, but it's a beautiful word, very descriptive word. They say my groceries are so much more. I have it, the term is just like an old term, and it's a beautiful.
Groceries, a term I used to use. It's sort of an old-fashioned term, but I used to use it.
groceries. It sort of says a bag with different things in it.
Word grocery, it's sort of simple word, but it sort of means like everything you eat.
Such a basic term, groceries. The groceries, they mean every single item of grocery.
This claim consists of two parts. The first of these parts is unfalsifiable. We will never know what 2021 through 2024 might have looked like if Donald Trump had been president. But what we do know is that the other half of this statement has been put to the test. Donald Trump did, in fact, become the president of the United States again, and the claim turned out to be demonstrably bullshit. I see no reason to entertain the factuality of the remaining half of this statement. Both parts of this statement come from the same place. They are founded in Donald Trump's baseless sense of self-importance. Surely Putin wouldn't have invaded Ukraine if I had asked him not to. Surely Putin would not continue to invade Ukraine if I asked him to stop. Well, of course Putin didn't stop the invasion just because a convicted felon running a crypto scam asked him to stop. I have become so sick of this tired old claim that the war would never have started if I had been president. Motherfucker, you are the president, and the whole world can see just how much influence you actually have, and precisely how many fucks Putin has to give about anything that falls out of your mouth. And he doesn't just cast blame upon Joe Biden. He also blames Volodymyr Zelensky for letting the war happen. There are some things that are so stupid that I don't even know how to begin reacting to them. This is not some small nugget of truth that has been presented out of context or twisted beyond recognition. It's nothing that interesting. This is just a sexual predator asking, what were you wearing when you got raped? Wasn't Ukraine kind of asking for it, strutting around with those sexy rare earth minerals hanging out for all the world to see? God damn, no wonder somebody came along and grabbed him by the puss. Just a rapist engaging in a bit of old-fashioned victim blaming. But, as we talked about before, it's not merely that Donald Trump loves Putin, or that he just loves dictators in general, or that he simply hates the so-called free world. As we talked about in that previous video, Donald Trump has no talents or virtues. He has nothing to offer reasonable people. So instead, he seeks out scattered factions of unreasonable people. He says stupid things that he knows are not true in an effort to appeal to the dregs of society, religious fundamentalists, science deniers, Nazis, QAnoners. If there is a right-wing movement or a conspiracy theory out there that is too ludicrous to be granted a seat at the grown-up table, Donald Trump is going to find some way to suggest that he too is one of them, that he can be their champion, that he can be a voice for these scorned and forgotten fringe movements. We went over several examples of this in the last video, how Donald Trump regularly pays lip service to multiple, widely varying conspiracy theorists, science deniers, and hate groups. And that is a part of what this is, this constant lambasting of Zelensky. It is not that Donald Trump's mind is so far gone that he sincerely believes that being invaded counts as starting a war. It is not that Trump actually thinks that any of this is Zelensky's fault, or that Zelensky could have done anything to avoid the invasion of his country. This goes back to Trump's well-documented efforts to shower praise upon dictators and war criminals. It goes back to what we talked about in the last video, how the evangelical movement has propagated countless conspiracy theories about the evils of the free world and the dangers of international cooperation. In the eyes of these churches' followers, the democratic free world is largely seen as the beginnings of the rule of the Antichrist, and dictators like Putin, who stand up against the free world, are painted as being strong, noble leaders who are standing up to whatever secret satanic globalist cabal is actually hiding beneath the shadow of the United Nations. Once again, as we have already talked about, Donald Trump's entire claim to political relevance is founded upon his appealing to right-wing conspiracy theorists and religious wackadoodles. And while the general mindset of free world bad, dictators am heroes has become a defining feature of modern right-wing culture, there is no shortage of conspiracy theories that specifically vilify Zelensky and Ukraine. Exempla gratia. There is a widespread conspiracy theory in right-wing circles concerning how Putin is actually a hero, waging a righteous war and attempting to liberate Ukraine from a Nazi regime that has secretly taken over Ukraine and is holding its people hostage. This conspiracy theory is lifted straight out of the trash heap of Kremlin propaganda. It is founded entirely on pseudo-history, photoshopped images, pretending to confuse Ukraine's military emblem with the Nazi Iron Cross, and just outright lying about shit. This is how upside down things have become under the shadow of Donald Trump's regime. Not only do Trump and his acolytes pretend to be confused over who started the war and whose fault it is, but they also pretend to believe that Zelensky is the real dictator here. On February the 19th, on Truth Social, Donald Trump wrote that Zelensky was, quote, a dictator without elections. This outright lie has been parroted by right-wing talking heads and has since become a core building block of MAGA doctrine. Now, obviously Donald Trump and every right-wing influencer who has ever made this claim know that this is an untrue statement. According to Article 108 of the Constitution of Ukraine, quote, the President of Ukraine exercises his or her powers until the assumption of office by the newly elected President of Ukraine. And in Article 19 of Ukraine's martial law legislation, with a little help from Google Translate, we find, quote, under martial law, the following shall be prohibited, holding elections of the President of Ukraine. These are not things that you get to just take on faith. You don't get to choose whether you want to believe me or believe Donald Trump and his lackeys. The Constitution of Ukraine and their martial law legislation are not these obscure documents, such that you have to take either my word or Donald Trump's word for it about what they say. Both of these documents are freely available, in full, online, and now they are in the pinned comment of this video. And it is clear, if you read up on what Ukrainian law actually says, that Zelensky is not a dictator for not holding an unfair election in which parts of the population would be unable to vote because there are entire sections of Ukraine that are currently occupied by hostile forces. In fact, Zelensky would be in violation of the Ukrainian martial law legislation if he were to try to hold an election at this time. He would be a dictator, in open violation of Ukrainian law, if he were to hold an election now while parts of Ukraine are occupied and martial law is in effect. Donald Trump and his acolytes understand this. They are aware of the fact that Ukrainian law forbids presidential elections at this time. They understand that the allegations of Zelensky being a Nazi and a dictator are falsehoods built upon a pretense of confusion. And they know that Putin is a war criminal and that Putin started the war. That being said, let's get back to this shit show.
That war should have never been allowed to happen. That war, I went 4 years and Putin wouldn't even bring it up. And as soon as the election was rigged and I wasn't here, that war started.
Stop right there. He just couldn't help himself. He had to shoehorn in that stupid remark about the 2020 election being rigged. Well, Donald Trump has been back in the White House for the better part of a year now. He has taken control of the Department of Justice and has saturated independent agencies with his deranged Muppets, and he still doesn't have any evidence to show us indicating that the election was rigged. What we do have is evidence of Donald Trump trying and failing to rig the election. And when I say evidence of Trump's rigging the election, I don't mean some complicated, nuanced thing that came out in a hearing behind closed doors that CNN later reported on where you just have to take my word for it. No, we have Donald Trump on tape harassing Georgia's Secretary of State, the Republican Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, urging him to commit election fraud.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes. So what are we going to do here, folks? I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break.
We have Donald Trump on video, inciting an angry mob, directing them to march on the Capitol to fight for their country, with the stated goal of forestalling the peaceful democratic transfer of power.
To use a favorite term that all of you people really came up with, we will stop the steal. We will not let them silence your voices. And we're going to have to fight much harder. You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong. When you catch somebody in a fraud, you're allowed to go by very different rules. We fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. And we're going to the Capitol. So let's walk down Pennsylvania Avenue.
But perhaps, you may well say, people misinterpreted Donald Trump's words. Maybe he never meant to incite a violent insurrection, and when he told his angry mob of cultists to get out there and fight, he didn't actually mean that he wanted them to go out there and fight. Maybe he wanted the angry mob to peacefully protest the democratic transfer of power. Even if you were to try to argue for such an absurdity, that Donald Trump just accidentally incited a violent insurrection, there is still no denying that once the bloodshed started, Donald Trump chose to ride that wave and see where it would take him. As rioters were breaking into the Capitol and calling for the vigilante execution of Mike Pence, as lawmakers and officials were fleeing for their lives, evacuating besieged buildings and pleading for the deployment of the National Guard, Donald Trump did nothing. He did not deploy the National Guard. He did not make a public statement calling for his attack dogs to disperse. Rather, while the attack was still ongoing, he took the time to get on Twitter and throw a bit of gasoline on the fire by tweeting, quote, "Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth." Meanwhile, the violence and the bloodshed and destruction continued, and Donald Trump did nothing. He didn't even direct the mob which he had instigated and which had come to the Capitol at his invitation to leave the area until 4:17 p.m., 3 full hours after the first acts of violence had been reported. 2 hours later, at about 6 p.m., Trump tweeted again, referring to the violent insurrectionists as, quote, "great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated." Then, 4 years later, Donald Trump pardoned the January 6th insurrectionists. Even the violent offenders whose actions resulted in the deaths of at least 3 police officers and the wounding of at least 138 officers. Donald Trump pardoned all of them, not in spite of the fact that they had attempted to overturn the results of a presidential election in his name, but because of it. The 2020 United States presidential election was not stolen. If there were any evidence of that being the case, Donald Trump would have had something to show us by now. But all the evidence he has ever offered of his claims is just more and bigger claims. He brags about the sizes of the crowds at his rallies. and he tells tall tales about missing votes and redundant votes and fraudulent votes and just more and more claims on top of claims without sources or citations or data, all of it flying straight in the face of everything that we can show to be true. But we do know and can show that there was an attempt made to steal the election, both by treachery and by violence, just not by the Democrats. The attempt was actually made by that one guy who is understood to be a scheming grifter, a sexual predator, and a con man. Who could have seen that one coming?
There was no way that war should have been allowed to happen. And Biden should have stopped it. And you take a look at Putin. I'm not saying anybody's an angel, but I will tell you, I went 4 years and it wasn't even a question. He would never, and I told him, don't do it. You're not going to do it.
You kept the peace by telling Putin, don't do it. Like I said earlier, we've already seen what Donald Trump's don't do it is worth when it comes to resolving international conflicts. And the absurdity of it, the way Donald Trump talks about Putin, like he's just a nice guy that you've got to be willing to make a deal with. And I don't know, be willing to wear enough garish makeup and demonstrate that you have the linguistic capabilities of a 4th grader, I guess? We're gonna back this video up a little bit and get back some of our lost momentum before we continue on here. That's partly to give his words a bit of context, but it's mostly because this whole shtick. It's Biden's fault, and it wouldn't have happened in the first place if I had been here, and now I'm here and nothing has changed, but that's because it's actually Biden's fault, and it wouldn't have happened in the first place if the bullshit and the fuckduckery. The whole bit is so damn funny. Just listen to this shit and tell me that Donald Trump talking about Russia's invasion of Ukraine doesn't remind you of a 9-year-old whose terrier just bit a sizable chunk out of the mailman's calf. And now the 9-year-old is throwing a tantrum because the mailman deigned to kick his dog off of him and went so far as to shout, "Bad dog," at it. And now the little boy is sulking about it like, Flu-Flu's not a bad dog. The mailman is just a mean old stupid face for kicking Flu-Flu and calling Flu-Flu a bad dog. And it wouldn't have even happened if it hadn't been walking around out there with that stupid mailbag over his stupid shoulder. And Flu-Flu wouldn't have even been out in the road if my dad had been paying attention. Fuck you, Dad. The President of the United States of America, ladies and gentlemen.
If Biden were competent, and if Zelensky were competent, and I don't know that he is. We had a rough session with this guy over here. He just kept asking for more and more. That war should have never been allowed to happen. That war, I went 4 years and Putin wouldn't even bring it up. And as soon as the election was rigged and I wasn't here, that war started. There was no way that war should have been allowed to happen. And Biden should have stopped it. And you take a look at Putin. I'm not saying anybody's an angel, but I will tell you, I went 4 years and it wasn't even a question. He would never, and I told him, don't do it. You're not going to do it. And it was the apple of his eye, but there was no way that he would have done it. All you had to do is lower oil prices. If you lowered oil prices, Biden kept the prices so high because he made it impossible to get it. If you lowered oil prices, you would have never had the war.
So Donald Trump is now making the claim that the war wouldn't have happened if Biden hadn't made oil so expensive. I don't even know how he landed on that conclusion. I assume it's just because Russia is Biden's fault, and you gotta drill, baby, drill, are two of Trump's favorite talking points, and he's just kind of combining the two of them into one incoherent amalgamation. But let's assume he's being serious for a moment and go over this claim point by point. First of all, Russia never claimed high oil prices as a reason for their invading Ukraine. They were not attempting to plunder Ukraine's oil reserves or sink oil wells in the middle of Kiev. That just isn't even a theory that is on the table. Now, maybe Trump is arguing that higher oil prices on a global scale gave Russia the opportunity to more effectively enrich itself through oil production, and that this increase in economic might could have paved the way for them to launch an invasion of Ukraine? This idea makes a little more sense. Russia is a major oil producer and exporter. Higher oil prices do have a direct positive impact on Russia's GDP, as well as the value of their currency. The higher the cost of oil, the better equipped for an invasion Russia is going to be. Which, if that's what Donald Trump is trying to say, then I am actually impressed by his understanding of global economics. I'm not used to him appearing to be aware of things, and it kind of caught me off guard to hear him making this argument. He's still wrong, obviously, but wrong in a more sophisticated way than he usually is, when he's spouting off about windmills giving people cancer and giving whales brain damage.
They say the noise causes cancer. You tell me that one, okay? You know, the thing makes it so... And, of course, it's like a graveyard for birds. They're dangerous. You see what's happening up in the Massachusetts area with the whales. The windmills are driving the whales crazy, obviously.
Joe Biden did not make oil more expensive. I know this might come as a bit of a shock if you live off in MAGA land and get all of your information from self-avowed entertainers who are, by their own admission, only role-playing as journalists on Fox News, but during the Biden administration, the United States set new records in oil production and exportation. You may ask then, but what about all that talk from Trump about how the United States is facing an energy emergency, and how we've got to reclaim our energy dominance and we've got to drill, baby, drill? Well, what was that all about indeed? Here is the data from the United States Energy Information Administration. The United States energy production, including oil, reached an all-time high during Biden's presidency. The United States was second in the world, only to China in terms of energy production. With the exception of oil, the United States held first place in oil production. That is what all of the data and all of the charts tell us about oil production under the Biden administration. So what about all of Donald Trump's claims about an energy emergency and how Biden's leadership was making oil more expensive? I have shown you my sources, and I have linked them below so you can see them for yourselves. What, pray tell, are Donald Trump's sources? Obviously, he isn't basing his claims on the official data provided by the United States Energy Information Administration. Did he travel to shipping ports around the nation and count the outgoing barrels of oil himself? Does he have some secret source of energy production data that we don't know about? If he actually had access to some sort of hidden, forbidden knowledge concerning oil production, or immigration numbers, or crime statistics, then he could explain how he came by this knowledge. He could back up his claims. But he won't back them up, because he can't, because he doesn't have forbidden knowledge. He hasn't glimpsed the dark truths that the globalist deep state operatives have worked so hard to conceal from us. He is a con man, making claims that he knows are without merit, hoping that he will come across to his reality-denying conspiracy theorist cultists as enlightened and insightful and courageous. Donald Trump is none of these things. He is an absurd, vindictive, and very small man. He was not being insightful, nor courageous, nor sincere when he lied about cats and dogs being eaten by immigrants in Springfield, nor when he claimed that 81% of white homicide victims are killed by black people, claiming that this data came from the Crime Statistics Bureau of San Francisco, an agency which does not exist. Neither is he being insightful nor sincere when he claims that Democrats stole the election in 2020, nor when he pretends to think that Volodymyr Zelensky was a dictator, or that Volodymyr Zelensky started the war with Russia. Like I said at the start of this video, things are moving fast. Just weeks ago, Donald Trump was praising Vladimir Putin, bragging about what a wonderful relationship they had, and boasting about how Putin had wished him a very nice happy birthday. Days ago, Donald Trump boasted that he was moving nuclear submarines into position around Russia because of a tweet that Donald Trump didn't like from former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. Because words are very important and can often lead to unintended consequences. I hope this will not be one of those instances. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, Donald Trump seems to be stepping back into his preferred dramatic role on the global stage, as the tragic peacekeeper, the heart-sick hero caught between two war-torn nations, eternally grieving the destruction of those big, beautiful domes.
Those domes, those golden, beautiful, ancient domes, 1,000-year-old buildings with the gold domes, those beautiful golden domes.
Those beautiful golden domes, the multicolored domes.
You have those magnificent golden domes, 1,000-year-old domes that are so beautiful, those 1,000-year-old golden domes.
And, as per usual, Volodymyr Zelensky, the victim of Russia's illegal invasion, is not invited. Out of the three presidents involved, Trump, Putin, and Zelensky, only one of them is not a dictator. Only one of them is the victim of a lawless invasion. But it is the two out of the aforementioned three who are dictators who are going to meet up like two old friends to discuss how best to carve up Volodymyr Zelensky's country. Donald Trump fancies himself to be a maker of deals. He would love nothing more than to fuck over Ukraine, cut a sweet deal with Vladimir Putin, and be able to brag about how he was able to negotiate an end to the war and jack himself off to the thought of what a special little man he is and how badly he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. What deal, I ask of you, is there that might possibly come of this meeting that would be anything less than morally repugnant? There is no deal to be made with the dictatorial war criminal Vladimir Putin. The very notion of a deal means that there is some manner of tit for tat, that something is being given for something gained, such as Ukraine giving up some of its territory in exchange for Russia stopping the war. Think about what that really means. For years, Russia has been like a schoolyard bully picking on the smaller children and trying to steal their lunch. But fortunately for the other children, Russia was not the only large boy on the playground. For years, the United States has acted like a deterrent to the bullies, sitting with the smaller children like Ukraine and keeping their lunches safe. Recently, the United States has gone from helping to keep Ukraine's lunch out of Russia's hands and has started poking Ukraine on the back of the head and asking them questions like, "What's wrong with you? Why do you keep getting into fights with Russia? Do you even want peace?" Now the United States has started talking to the bully behind the smaller kid's back, trying to negotiate how much of their sandwich they have to give to the bully for it to be enough for them to stop beating up Ukraine, at least for today, with no real guarantee that the bully won't try to take more of their lunch tomorrow. And also talking about how Ukraine should really give the United States their apple slices, just because they kept them safe for so long before, and they never even bothered to say thank you. Whatever happened to the United States wanting to be perceived as a benevolent giant on the world stage, watching out for the free world without demanding anything in return? Because when you're that big and strong, if you don't look out for your friends, then what good even are you? Now, under Donald Trump's morally bankrupt and completely transactional leadership, the United States has quickly become a very different kind of giant. The asshole beanstalk-dwelling variety that hoards gold and only bothers to drop down upon the village below to ask, "What's in it for me?" I'll admit, this is a fucked up analogy for me to make, because these are not sandwiches and lunches that are on the line here. It's not even lands and territories. It is people that are on the line. It is innocent Ukrainian civilians living under Russian rule in occupied Ukrainian territories who are at risk of seeing the Russian occupation become a legally recognized transfer of ownership. Citizens of a democratic nation who are on the verge of being surrendered to the mercies of a fascist dictatorial regime with a well-documented history of cruelty and crimes against humanity. Maybe that transfer has already happened. Like I said, things are moving fast these days, and it takes me a while to get these videos edited and uploaded. Maybe by the time you are seeing this, Ukraine has already been carved up like a Thanksgiving turkey, with Russia getting to expand its borders and the United States getting to harvest a share of Ukraine's rare earth minerals. Or maybe Trump is back to teasing us with the possibility of World War III and boasting about his strategic maneuvering of nuclear submarines. Or perhaps Trump and Putin are just in public agreement that Zelensky is the real dictator here, and by God, he absolutely sucks, doesn't he? And the war is still going on, much as it has been. Who even knows? I certainly don't. I am only a little pea pod in a wide world, after all. But I'm going to keep on making these videos as long as I can, and trying my best to keep myself, and to help to keep all of you, as caught up on everything as I can, as the world decomposes around us. That's all for this one. Until next time. Peace.